Beautiful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in our series for Frontier Incubators, Developing Innovative Business Models. We're delighted to welcome Fledge, Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, and Vilgro as our program partners participating. With this webinar, we are delighted to help introduce the Frontier Incubators program, which is an initiative of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Australian Government, Australian Aid and Innovation Exchange. To give a little background on the Frontier Incubators program, this is designed to help build the capacity of a cohort of incubators and accelerators through tailored training, opportunities to grow, and access to expert mentors. To be clear, when we do say incubators and accelerators, we are referring to enterprise support organizations more broadly. With this, we will help develop public resources, including webinars like these, to support the broader development of incubators and accelerators in the region, and to also connect incubators and accelerators around the Asia-Pacific region with one another and with our program partners. Some key dates to keep in mind. Our applications are now open. They will close on July 31st, and we will announce our cohort around October of 2018, and we will start conducting the capacity building trainings from November 2018 through June 2019. Our presenting partners include, for all of these webinars, include Second Muse, myself, Avery Kent with conveners.org, Akana Foundation, Fledge, Invest to Innovate, Kanara, Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, Uncharted, Village Capital, and Vilgro. With that, important to keep in mind, you can apply at frontierincubators.org before July 31st. Help us spread the word and join the conversation with the Frontier Incubators hashtag. And if you have any questions or would like to explore partnership opportunities or ways that you can support the program, please email us at hello@frontierincubators.org. With that, we do have a couple of webinars that'll be coming up next, but we'd like to go ahead and kick off our conversation about developing innovative business models and sustainable revenue streams. As many of you know, as program partners who and as folks who are running programs yourselves, developing a sustainable business model can be a real challenge. We are really delighted to welcome our partners today who will be speaking about a wide variety of methods for financing incubators and accelerators around the world. Steph, with that, I think we can close the PowerPoint. Thank you. Wonderful. And so with that, I'd like to take the opportunity to first welcome our program partners and have them give a brief introduction to themselves. So Looney, we'll start with you. If you can share your organization and sharing the actual business model for Fledge and if any changes have happened over time.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name's Looney. I run a business accelerator and actually a network of business accelerators that all go by the name of Fledge. We're a little different in this space. We work with mission-driven for-profit companies, as everyone does, but we're organized as a for-profit company. We're trying to prove out that not only can the companies themselves be sustainable, but that we can run a sustainable business by investing in those sustainable businesses. So the way it works is companies from around the world apply. We pick a small handful. We tend to do 7 or 8 companies per session. We invite them to one of our cities. We run the program in Seattle, Lima, Peru, Barcelona in Catalonia, Vancouver in Canada, and right now it's running in the University of Padua in Italy. Each company that gets invited in gets $20,000 of investment from us. They spend some of that money to go to that city, whichever one they're invited to, for 10 weeks, where we run the program, similar to a lot of the other programs. And in exchange for the cash and all the help we provide, we take 6% ownership of the company. So this is a model that you may have seen in the tech world. It was the model that Techstars and Y Combinator invented now 12 years ago. The one difference that we do versus them, besides focusing on social good companies, is that we structure our investments as revenue-based equity. So we are making investments in companies and we're taking equity ownership, but the companies are then obliged to repurchase our equity from us using 4% of future revenues. And they take 4% divided by whatever the share price comes out to be for their particular company, and they're buying back half our shares using 4% of future revenues, returning us everything we spent in order to run the program and hand them the cash twice over. So if half the companies fail, and we do, so far we're doing much better than half, but if half the companies fail, it's a break-even proposition. And if less than half the companies fail, then we're making money. And we're supported by investors in this model. So the other directors, and our investors are all taking the expectation that 2/3 to 3/4 of these companies will survive, they'll grow, and from that we'll earn a profit doing this. And then what we changed from the very beginning, we've been doing this for 6 years. We're in our 13th cohort. We've helped 81 companies so far. And the big change came a year ago after we did 11 cohorts, or 10 cohorts. And last year we added a series of seed funds to go along with the accelerator. So now in some cases, when we have enough capital in these funds and the companies fit what the investors are looking for, we'll do follow-on investments as well. And that capital just looks like a very small venture capital fund. So we'll write $5,000 or $10,000 or $25,000 up to $200,000 checks to graduates of our program that are in need of growth capital. And of course, there's more details to it, but that's the simple model.
Great, thank you so much, Looney. Paul, I'd love to turn it to you next and to share the build grow model.
Ragini, do you want to go for it?
Paul, I think you can take this one. I'll take the next one.
All right. Just briefly introducing our work. We're a business incubator, not a typical accelerator. We do 2 to 3 years of engagement. We work with for-profit companies. We work with companies that are mission-oriented, serving the base of the pyramid. We work in the sectors of agribusiness, education, healthcare, and energy. We love innovations. We fund them. We mentor them. We provide a whole lot of networks and a process which we call diagnostic and solutioning panels, which happen once in every 3 months. And with all of that, we hope to make companies profitable and investable with the hope that over time they become scalable. So that's really our model. Focused in India now, but also operating in Kenya, Philippines, and Vietnam. And the hope is that we can then scale it up across other countries across the world. So that's really what Buildgrow does. And to briefly introduce the revenue models, Ragini, can you just get started with that?
Sure. All right, so I'm going to speak about a little bit of our non-grant revenue streams. So like Looney mentioned, we have a version of revenue share agreements as well. So for those companies that have their products in the market, have consistent sales, a part of their quarterly revenue comes back to us as incubation fees. And this is typically in the range of between 0.5 to 2% of their entire quarterly revenue. So that's one aspect of it. Another bit is about consulting and advisory arrangements that we do. And one model that we do is to really run accelerators for corporates in the space. And this is very sector specific. So for those sectors that we have relevant experience for, we're launching a cohort next month for a clean tech and agri-tech accelerator. And so that's one aspect of the consulting assignments that we do. The next one is portfolio management for external organizations. And again, for this, the investment money comes from a partner organization, and the incubation methodology and all of the staff and resources comes through Willgrow. So that's a bit of the snippet of some of the work that we do, but I'm happy to elaborate on some of the other things that we, some of our other kinds of non-grant assignments as we go along.
Great, thank you so much. And Pamela, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, good morning. So Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship is based at Santa Clara University, and we support entrepreneurs in helping them basically build sustainable and scalable organizations, taking their impact model, helping them build a business model that supports them being able to grow their impact while growing their business. We've been doing this for over 16 years and supported over 900 social entrepreneurs. Now, unlike Willgrow and Fledge, we actually support for-profits, nonprofits, and hybrids. So we have support for all of these organizations. And for nonprofits, what we want to see is that they have an earned income revenue model supporting them. What's really important to us is that we support any social enterprise, again, in that broad definition of for-profit, nonprofit, and hybrids, that wants to have our services and work with us. And so we don't charge the social entrepreneurs anything. We don't take any equity or any equity position in them, and we actually take it upon ourselves to basically do the fundraising to support our operating costs. Over the last 7 years, since Thane Croitor, our executive director, has taken the position, we've increased our operation costs by over 4 times, and we're doing this through just our own ability to fundraise so that we can support any social entrepreneur that meets the criteria that we have and that we talked about in the last webinar that meets our criteria. So, we're talking to, of course, high net worth individuals, but foundations and such, and really trying to align with, really wanting to see and understanding that entrepreneurship is a path out of poverty and is a way to mitigate climate change. What I'd say that's changed for us over the last few years is I think we've seen, and happy to talk about this a lot more, and it sounds like Willgrow is doing something. I'm not sure exactly how this relates to corporations, and really aligning with their business objectives in order to help us support social entrepreneurs, which will help in turn drive back business value to them. So like I said, happy to discuss that more as we go along.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pamela. For those who are just joining us, if you do have any questions as participants, please feel free to send us a chat. You can send it to everyone, and we'll incorporate that into our discussion today. So with that, Regina, I wanted to kick off with a little bit of a clarification of your model. So you explained you're taking a little bit of 0.5% to 2% off of the revenue, right? So that's top line. That's before they've taken out their own expenses. Is there any mechanism that you use to make that either free cash flow dependent? And what I mean by that is that you taking out your portion is not going to end up putting the business under or causing them to not meet their own internal needs.
Paul, do you want?
Yeah, so I think the contracts are very clear. Each time when there's a revenue share, payment to be made to Willgrow, in this particular case of revenue share agreements, we make sure that the financials, the profit and loss, the income statements are reviewed, and if there is serious cash flow crunches and challenges, and investors aren't funding it appropriately, we make sure that we defer those payments. So I think we create that flexibility, but guided by decisions of the board of the company, as opposed to too much of an informal one-on-one decision making. So we really look at that. We look at whether the cash flows are sufficient enough to make our payment. Is that because of certain inefficiency, because investors haven't really capitalized the company well? If so, we really defer those payments.
Yeah, and if I can jump in and second that motion, it happens, right? Things go wrong in startups. What we know, all of us who help startups, is that things go wrong at startups. And when they do, our job is not first and foremost to collect money from them. It's to see that they survive. Right? So often that's adding money to them as opposed to taking it away.
Great, thank you for that. So I'm sure that many people are familiar with the kind of Techstars and Y Combinator model of taking an equity stake in a company. And I know in other conversations we've had, one of the challenges raised has been, in many cases, the lack of essentially a secondary market, that it's been really challenging to for social enterprises in particular to get an exit where that kind of equity stake for the accelerator is actually going to pay off sufficiently that it's going to cover operations and all of that. So I'm curious if you can speak to when is it really appropriate or beneficial to use that equity stake model, recognizing that both Fledge and Velgro have gone more the revenue perspective, but kind of broadening out to the wider field. When might that equity stake model be appropriate for financing your accelerator?
Okay, so I'll take that first. So yeah, specifically we use a revenue-based equity model, and I don't know of another program that's doing that. There's other programs I've seen that do rev shares and revenue loans. We chose to go the equity path because we do a huge span of businesses from tech for good companies in the U.S. and chemical technologies and clean tech to companies out in the developing world where there is no history of exits at all in their country. And so we picked the model starting with the Techstars piece on purpose, because then we don't have to negotiate for each company individually and to say, okay, you're on the path that doesn't need this equity piece, but you guys are. And this way, everybody walks in with the same amount of money in the same deal, with some with often 1 out of 7 that are one-off variations for some other reason. Second reason we picked the equity path instead of debt is because in the U.S., the tax rate on gains for investors is lower on capital gains than on any other form of income. And so if we haven't earned a profit yet, but when we earn a profit, then those profits are taxed at the lowest rates possible to our investors. And if it takes 5 years or more, that rate is 0 in the U.S. And so it's highly beneficial. The U.S. government gives us an incentive to structure it as equity as opposed to debt, where that would be ordinary income. That could be 38% tax rate. And then thirdly, although we don't believe in exits, we don't believe that the be-all, end-all, or highest purpose of starting a company is to exit. Neither do our entrepreneurs. But given 100 or 200 companies, the odds are 1 or 2 or 3 of them will exit. And when they do, again, we're funded by investors, and they would like to get remunerated for that risk they took. And so you add that all up, and we think the equity model is a good model.
Great. Thank you, Lenny. Paul Regini, would you like to go next?
We do equity when we invest in really super tech companies, cool companies which can really scale up globally. And we really believe that it's a much longer game. We need to wait patiently. But then at some point, there's a huge hockey stick that will kick in. And that's when we actually like equity, which means early stage, proto stage, technology kind of companies with with huge scale that we foresee. We do rev share when the product is in the market, preferably for service companies, where we believe that revenues kick into actually quite early, and that's the stage that we actually do rev share. And that's how we differentiate between the two. But that doesn't mean that we don't do rev share for a product tech company, but this is general guidance and practice that we use.
And are there other reasons with the hardware or a product company why a revenue share might be more challenging?
We're seeing that the investments required to reiterate on a prototype, to reinvest in new products, to launch it, especially if you take medical devices, the time is so long. There's much more money that needs to be plowed back to building and refining product. And in such cases, we believe that there is not a possibility. By the way, it also takes quite a long time to get to. So, waiting for a rev share for 5 years, 6 years doesn't actually make sense. The challenge in rev share is there's a lot of investor pushback. The next round investor coming back wouldn't like the money to go out of the country. They would like the money to be plowed back and staying in the company. So that's actually why we do rev share for service companies.
Thank you for that clarification. Pamela, did you have anything you wanted to add to that as well?
Yeah, thanks, Avery. So we don't do this directly. We don't have a fund to pull from and working with investors. But one of the things that my colleague John Kohler has done has innovated on a form of investment called variable payment obligation or demand dividend, which is more like a venture debt. And so then from the exit piece that you were asking about, Avery, basically it's the entrepreneur earning back the equity that, the equity that they've given out to the lender. And we see this as, and the reason John was creating this is that many of the entrepreneurs that we work with, and so again, we're working with for-profits, nonprofits, and all serving the poor. And so many of these people care deeply about the communities. They're not looking for an exit in terms of selling to another organization and such. They just and some of them are family-run businesses and things, and so the idea of selling out to another organization and such is just an anathema to them. So that's where something like the variable payment obligation or demand dividend, which is payment based on, and you were just talking about this a little while ago, is payment based on free cash flow, so that then they earn back the position in their company once the debt is cleared. So that's something that we think that, and we've seen now many investors working with social entrepreneurs in that kind of structure, so that it's not about having to see that next big exit in order for others to make their money downstream.
Great, thank you for that. As many of you touched on this, and we've really seen this, I think, as a larger growing trend, is this connection to corporate sponsorship, right? Larger and larger corporations are, starting to explore, should they start their own in-house incubators and accelerators, or should they just partner with somebody who's already created one? And they do tend to be a little more thematic and specific. And I'm wondering if you have any advice you might share on ways to, build the relationships with people in the corporations who are even the right people that you might want to talk to within a corporation, and how, if you are a younger or newer program, especially coming from the Asia Pacific region, how might you start that process so that that kind of sponsorship and cohort engagement is more tangible and achievable?
Shall I kick us off with
Sure.
this? So I like I said, this has been a new evolution in our funding model, if you will, our business model. And so first of all, in terms of, how to think about this, first of all, I'd say that these are not short-term wins. Oftentimes, these are conversations that happen over time. So if you're looking for something that's a short-term win, this is probably not a good way to go. But and this is the way that I personally think about this, and when I'm mentoring social entrepreneurs, is that creating alignment between the corporation's business and what social entrepreneurs and the social entrepreneurs you're working with as a incubator or accelerator program, I think that that's really key. And so where is not going to the CSR dollars and trying to just try to get whatever they feel they want to fund that day, because CSR dollars tend to be fickle. But if you can get alignment into their business and help them see how they can drive their business objectives, is critical. So two examples that we have that we've done recently. One is with an organization called Seagate, which is the designer manufacturer for most of the hard disk and storage devices around that are in your laptops and jump drives and all that. And we worked, the operations, the manufacturing operations is based in Bangkok. And so we worked with the team at Seagate to train their employees there, which are manufacturing entrepreneurs and finance and admin type people, to train them how to be mentors and teach them more business skills and how to think about this, and then introduce them to social entrepreneurs, go in country, train social entrepreneurs with their employees mentoring. And what that did was it created kind of an opportunity for this employee development, basically employee learning, and learning opportunities. So that, and that's what Seagate's trying to do, is provide opportunities for their employees and such to learn new things and new skills and such. So that was directly in alignment with a business objective that they had. Another example is with GE. GE has an affordable healthcare product line, and we partnered with GE Ventures and the GE Africa team, who has an enormous potential on the African continent to move their affordable healthcare products, but has no idea how to do that. GE knows how to talk to ministers of health. They have no idea how to talk to rural healthcare clinics. And through social entrepreneurs, who are setting up rural healthcare clinics, then that is a way for them to do what I call market sensing. So we've worked with them on a couple of cohorts now, focused on maternal and child care outcomes based in sub-Saharan Africa, so that they can gain information, access, knowledge about what's happening and connect them to an enormous market potential for them. So those are two examples about, again, connecting social entrepreneurs with business outcomes and objectives that a corporation has.
Great, thank you, Pamela. And Regina, I believe you mentioned that this is something else that Bilgrow is working on currently.
Yes, I think I have only two things to add to what Pamela just said. And the first one's really looking at the synergy and saying that what did they gain from this engagement as well. And I think corporates have a lot to gain in their association, because this really gives them access to the startup community and to people who have experience in doing incubation work. And it helps them leverage that brand of incubation or acceleration that you build throughout these years, right? And I think the second thing that I wanted to mention is in terms of how the partnership would work. the engagement has to be consistent. It has to be with them constantly being involved in adding to the sessions, some of the team coming in, contributing from the experience in that corporate sector space, because these are, like some of you mentioned, very keenly sector aligned. So really using that experience in that space and saying, this is what the market requires, and coming there and contributing during those accelerator programs that we need filled, and how do we innovate around that? So that's some of the key things.
Deniz, did you have anything else you'd like to add?
Briefly, so we haven't done a corporate partner yet. Our partner out in the University of Padua, Italy, is a consortium of universities. What happened in that case was an existing program got funded. They had already approved all the grant funding and the program, and the last stage of a multi-stage program was going to be a very small accelerator program. And I got introduced to basically the executive director of that project. And after a few conversations, we agreed we should make that a much bigger full-scale accelerator. So that's how we wound up with the Nature Accelerator in Italy. And in the world of social good, I'd say the foundations play as much a role as corporates do in the rest of startup land. And so we're in discussions with multiple foundations to run programs that would specifically target whatever the mission is of that part of that foundation.
I think that's a great segue into obviously the third revenue stream or income stream that tends to apply to impact-focused accelerators and incubators and enterprise support organizations, and that is grant funding. And so one of the kind of core questions, I think, is very similar to that of the corporations. What are some of the techniques for building the long-term relationship or finding that alignment that can lead to that synergy? Are there techniques for how you might approach those conversations and those relationships that you could suggest?
Someone else go first, because we don't have any grant funding.
So
I can go for it.
Okay, go, Paul.
Pam, go. Pam, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go. You go first.
Okay. So there are three types of grant makers for us. The first really being private foundations. We love them. There are foundations who really believe in innovation. There are foundations who believe in entrepreneurship, and it can be really multi-year engagement. And if your question was, how do you build that multi-year engagement, right? I think really connecting with their boards, not just the program officers, really connecting with their boards, getting an opportunity to actually present to their boards, getting an opportunity to get them to do site visits, come over in country and spend time with your investees. I think that's the fabulous way. One of our Swiss-based donors make it a point to actually spend 5 days in India every year. And that's really, really important, because they see the work done by the company that we are investing in and supporting. It also allows them to see and take feedback from the companies as to how we're actually supporting them. So that's, I think, one big source. The other piece is in countries like India, where technology and there's a lot of focus on entrepreneurship. We have a big startup policy and things like that. Government funding, all the departments, agriculture department, energy department, rural development department, science and technology. So there's a big focus. And when we work in other countries, I'm seeing the similar, support coming from the government. For example, in Philippines, the Ministry of Science and Technology has huge support to incubators, so as in Vietnam. While in Kenya, that's really not as big as in the other countries. So government becomes another form of support. And how do you work with governments? And I think working with governments is the most trickiest part. You've got to be very patient. You got to, suck up a little bit. You got to be able to stand patiently the bureaucracy. And I think you got to plan well ahead in time and align with some of the reporting. and reporting is such an important part of the government relationship. So you got to make sure that that really happens. And the last thing that we've learned with governments is being able to respond to their requests at the last minute and don't grumble about it. They call you for a meeting, tomorrow, you got to be there. Right. So I think things like that with the government. And the last piece is with corporate foundations. The biggest challenge is working with them is to work with very affordable fees, and they really squeeze you out. So how do you become more efficient? How do you really price yourself in an affordable manner that works for them? And especially if you're working even with their CSR departments, and much of the acceleration that we do, we actually work with their marketing and communications department as opposed to CSR. So I think CSRs love working with professionals, and we actually, most of the time, the front for some of this is work is counterparts of theirs who are working with us, who have actually worked with corporates in the past, and they just strike a chord saying, hey, my friend was your colleague in some other place. That really works, and corporate relationships and past working relationships can be great. So those are some ways, the softer ways on how which we handle some of those relationships.
If I can build on that, for us, we have had foundation support, but it's not the big foundations. I mean, there's kind of this natural affinity to go, in the U.S. is to go to Ford or Rockefeller or Hewlett or Packard, and honestly, we've not been successful with those kinds of organizations. It's the smaller organizations that kind of get what we're doing, that can move quickly with us and such. And so I think being able to match the energy and the timing and tempo of the way you work with your funder, I think is important. And the other how can I be politically correct around this? But we have one project that is USAID funded. Actually, it's a clean energy access program in India. It was a 3-year project, which we love multi-year projects. It's coming to an end now, but in getting into that, we had no idea how much of a heavy lift that would be in terms of, Paul was just talking about reporting and things like that. I mean, it's big, and as small organizations with limited resources, that gets to be a real challenge. So, thinking about that as you're looking at potential funding partners and such is important to understand that dynamic. And so, one of the things that we've said to ourselves is that in the future, working as a subcontractor to an organization that has much more of the infrastructure to support that kind of reporting and monitoring and evaluation requirements is a way to go. So look for folks that are there and that you can be a subcontractor and provide value to that overall relationship, but not have to manage it directly.
Thank you for that. So I want to make sure we leave some space for any questions that our participants have. Feel free to place those into the chat. If you hold your mouse over the bottom of the screen, there's a little chat icon, and you can type in the window to everyone, and we'll be able to see your question and share that with our presenters. Looks like maybe we don't have any questions. So if that's the case, and if anyone's just like typing a long one, please feel free to unmute yourself and just chime in. But otherwise, I think we might go ahead and end the call now. Great. Well, we wanted to thank everyone for making the time this evening to participate. Thank you to our program partners for sharing your insights. We're really excited to be working with you as we continue. Through this, as we showed previously, we do have 2 more webinars coming up. Our third one is happening on July 6th at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is July 5th, 8 p.m. Pacific Time here in the US. And that one will be focused on measuring and managing impact. We're really excited to welcome Fledge back, as well as our partner Uncharted and Akana Foundation. We have our 4th webinar on July 11th at 1 p.m. Australian and July 10th at 8 p.m. Pacific. On building strong relationships and networks. And I think that that is going to get more into the tactics that we only just touched upon today about the importance of those longer term and deeper relationships that are really sit at the heart of what makes an enterprise support organization successful. And that will be joined by Second Muse's team, Invest to Innovate, Akana Foundation, and conveners.org as well. To register, please join us at bit.ly/FI webinars. The capitals do matter. And we will work to address the technical difficulties so it's easier to register for these calls in the future. Thank you all so much for your time today, and we wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.